After being unable to sleep, Qin Mu immediately sat up and looked toward the window after hearing a strange, indistinct chanting outside. Chancellor Ba Shan was still sleeping deeply, his snores deafening, and even the cold wind blowing into the room failed to wake him. Qin Mu could not determine whether the chanting was soft or loud, slow or fast, but he immediately recognized the danger and used the heavenly devil creation technique to seal his souls and spirits before circulating his vital qi. Junior Protector Sword, which had been hanging at the head of his bed, flew out of its sheath, and its silver sword light illuminated the room. Outside the window, Qin Mu saw a white figure floating back and forth. Junior Protector Sword trembled and hummed before releasing several sword lights, instantly cutting down several apparent human heads outside. Qin Mu understood that although harming people with shaman spells seemed strange, such techniques ultimately attacked either the corporeal body or the soul. Spells targeting the corporeal body required secret techniques to enter the room and kill the victim directly, while soul-targeting spells could be much more difficult to guard against. Shaman poison, for example, could poison a person's soul while remaining colorless, odorless, formless, and traceless. Another method was to create a straw doll bearing the victim's birth date and horoscope and worship it for 10 days, causing one soul or spirit to be worshipped away each day. After 7 days, the 7 spirits would leave, followed by the 3 souls. There was also the victory loathing technique, which injured the soul in order to injure the physical body. By piercing the soul with needles or blades, a shaman could exploit the connection between the soul and corporeal body so that wounds inflicted on the soul would appear on the physical body. Piercing the soul's limbs could injure the corresponding limbs, while piercing the center of the brows could disturb the victim's mind. Qin Mu felt that killing someone merely by knowing their name was difficult to imagine, but it should be based on principles similar to these techniques. Therefore, he had sealed his souls and spirits and kept Junior Protector Sword beside his bed to defend against such attacks. Suddenly, a strange laugh rang out. Qin Mu looked over and saw countless tiny humans climbing through the window and jumping onto the floor. They carried knives, axes, and military forks and rode tiny horses, moving in formation like an army of several hundred soldiers. The tiny army rushed forward and climbed onto Chancellor Ba Shan's chest. Yet Ba Shan remained completely asleep, continuing to snore like thunder. The tiny soldier leading the army rode a steed across Ba Shan's nose and pointed a long spear toward Qin Mu, who was already sitting up. Its eyes shone with excitement, and after making an incomprehensible cry, the entire army surged toward Qin Mu like a flood. The tiny soldiers shouted excitedly and waved their weapons fiercely. Although there were several hundred of them, Qin Mu felt that he could crush them all with only 2 or 3 steps. He could not help wondering whether this strange situation was the reason Butcher had been unwilling to use his true name. Qin Mu drew his sword and prepared to release sword lights to destroy the entire tiny army. But just before he attacked, he suddenly heard someone calling his name. The voice entered with the cold wind and seemed to come from a distant place. With the words stretched out, Qin Mu remained silent, but the voice rapidly approached him. He realized that when someone called another person's name, even if the person did not answer, hearing their own name would produce an uncontrollable reaction in their heart. The attacker had used that reaction to sense Qin Mu's location. As Qin Mu's sword lights were about to sweep away the tiny soldiers, he suddenly felt a chill invade the center of his brows. His soul froze, his hand stopped while drawing the sword, and his entire body became immobile. Because his soul had been frozen, his body was frozen as well, and the sword lights naturally disappeared. The tiny humans immediately became excited. They climbed onto Qin Mu's body and burrowed into him through his mouth, ears, and nose. In the next instant, Qin Mu seemed to see the tiny humans carrying him away at full speed. He soon realized that they were not carrying his physical body at all. Instead, they had entered his body, tied up his soul, lifted it above their heads, and were carrying his soul away. Qin Mu could not understand their strange squeals as they shouted to one another and ran away with him. He was unable to move, while the scenery before his eyes flickered and eventually became completely black. All the surrounding light disappeared, leaving only darkness. Then he saw bubbles of light appearing beneath him and realized that he was lying on a sacrificial altar. The tiny humans placed him on the altar and looked upward. The leading tiny soldier squeaked toward the darkness, and the sacrificial altar slowly rose. Qin Mu looked around and saw enormous faces surrounding him on all four sides. They looked like the faces of wooden puppets, each one huge and displaying an expression that was neither quite smiling nor quite crying. The sacrificial altar trembled and rose again. A gigantic palm lifted the altar together with the four wooden puppets. And Qin Mu suddenly saw a blazing light in the darkness. It was a gigantic eye, far larger than the faces of the wooden puppets. Soon, more enormous eyes appeared and illuminated the darkness as they floated in the sky, creating an extremely strange sight. Qin Mu immediately suspected that this was the victory-loathing spell. He realized that Pangong So had most likely used victory-loathing spell to control the tiny humans and invade his body, trapping the souls and spirits he had sealed inside himself on this sacrificial altar. The technique was extremely strange. The voice had located him even though he had not answered, then somehow transformed into a sacrificial altar inside his body. Even sealing his souls and spirits had not been enough to stop it. Nevertheless, Qin Mu believed that his souls and spirits were still inside his body, meaning that he still had a chance to turn the situation around. He reasoned that regardless of what shaman spell Pangong So used, the caster ultimately had to rely on his own magic power. Inside Qin Mu's body, the enemy's magic power could never surpass his own, so the enemy should not be able to kill him. Qin Mu then flipped himself upright and shouted for his sword. A sword pellet suddenly flew through the darkness and floated before him. It was the sword pellet Mu had given him when Qin Mu had returned to the village for the new year. Qin Mu had previously used this sword pellet to draw out the remnant of a god's divine art from Imperial Preceptor's body, which had caused the sword pellet to be severely damaged and become smaller. Now, sword lights erupted from the pellet and swept in every direction, overwhelming the tiny humans. Qin Mu split their chests and bellies apart. But the tiny humans did not truly die. Their broken limbs crawled across the ground and reassembled themselves before continuing their assault. At the same time, the wooden puppets surrounding the sacrificial altar revealed strange smiles and stiffly raised their arms before repeatedly smashing them toward Qin Mu in the center of the altar. Their blows produced sparks in every direction. Qin Mu controlled the sword pellet to fight the wooden puppets and discovered that they possessed extraordinary strength, making their attacks extremely difficult to withstand. Some tiny humans were smashed flat by the wooden puppets and became as thin as paper. But moments later they expanded again as though they had been inflated and resumed attacking Qin Mu with their swords. Then the enormous eyes floating in the darkness suddenly blazed with fury and released beams of fire from all directions. Qin Mu gritted his teeth and endured the attacks. The repeated assaults caused his soul to approach the point of dispersal. The tiny humans, wooden puppets, and strange eyes all seemed capable of endlessly reviving, and there appeared to be no end to the enemies he had to kill. They attacked without fatigue and continued relentlessly. As Qin Mu became exhausted and was nearly driven into despair, he suddenly grew furious and wondered whether senior brother Ba Shan was still sleeping. At that moment, roosters began crowing in the distance, and Qin Mu faintly heard the night watchman striking his gong to announce the fifth and final watch of the night. Then he heard Chancellor Ba Shan yawn, with his voice seemingly coming from far away. Ba Shan said that he had waited the entire night, yet Pangong So had never personally come to visit, which was disappointing. Pangong So had been extremely cautious and, rather than personally casting a spell to kill junior brother Qin, had sent another great shaman to act for him. Qin Mu was stunned because Ba Shan clearly knew that he had been trapped. Ba Shan then remarked that it was a pity that only a great shaman of the Seven Stars realm had taken the bait. Qin Mu heard Ba Shan draw his knife. His tyrant knife came out of its sheath, and Ba Shan began singing about a golden knife adorned with white jade, its radiance piercing through the night, and a 50-year-old man carrying his knife alone through the 8 wildernesses despite having accomplished nothing. As the song continued, an overwhelmingly bright blade light tore through the darkness from above and ruthlessly descended upon the sacrificial altar. Heaven and earth immediately rumbled as the entire scene began to collapse and disintegrate. The knife seemed to split the world into 2 halves that slowly opened toward the left and right. Qin Mu then realized that the 2 halves were actually his own eyes gradually opening, although his eyelids seemed to be opening sideways. Chancellor Ba Shan appeared before him standing on the wall and explained that he had just undone the victory-loathing spell of Roland's Golden Palace. The spell had caused Qin Mu's eyeballs to become half-inverted, making him see toward the left and right. Ba Shan instructed him to mobilize the muscles around his eyes and slowly adjust his eyeballs back into their normal positions. Qin Mu followed his instructions, and after some time his eyeballs finally returned to normal. He immediately told Ba Shan that he had been trapped. Ba Shan nodded and pointed ahead, telling Qin Mu that the object before him was what had trapped him. Qin Mu lowered his head and was stunned to discover that the terrifying sacrificial altar was actually nothing more than a silver plate surrounded by 4 palm-sized wooden puppets. The tiny humans that had carried him were merely soybeans, while the tiny horses they rode were bean sprouts. The enormous eyes that had filled the darkness were actually the eyes of huge spiders rather than mysterious giant eyes arranged across the sky. Beneath the plate was a weasel. Ba Shan's knife had killed both the spider and the weasel, and they had died unnatural deaths. Ba Shan explained that he had initially expected Pangong So himself to make a move rather than sending a 7 stars realm great shaman. He believed Pangong So had avoided acting personally because he was worried Ba Shan would be beside Qin Mu. Qin Mu then looked out the window and discovered that the heads he had cut down with Junior Protector's sword were not real people either, but straw figures covered in white cloth. Qin Mu asked what had happened to the 7 stars realm great shaman. Ba Shan calmly replied that the shaman was dead. The shaman had cast victory loathing technique inside his dream in order to harm Qin Mu. But Ba Shan's knife had broken the spell. The knife then followed the spell into the shaman's dream and cut him down while he was sleeping. Ba Shan therefore said that the shaman had died very peacefully. Qin Mu remained skeptical and asked whether knife techniques could really be cultivated to such a level. Ba Shan answered that Teacher Heaven Knife's knife skills were legendary. Teacher Heaven Knife could even cut open the void, although Ba Shan himself was not capable of doing so. When morning arrived, the people of Imperial College were already discussing the death of another envoy from the barbarian D Empire. According to the reports, the envoy had suddenly died during the 5th watch, with blood flowing from all of his orifices. He had died in an extremely miserable state and had even screamed 3 times before collapsing. Qin Mu silently criticized Ba Shan's earlier claim that the shaman had died peacefully. In the afternoon, another shaman arrived, bowed respectfully, and informed Qin Mu that the prince had invited cult master Qin to a banquet. Pangong So had invited Qin Mu to a banquet despite having ordered a great shaman to cast a spell against his life the previous night. Qin Mu wondered whether Pangong So believed Roland's Golden Palace could pressure the Heavenly Devil cult because they were equivalent sacred grounds, or whether he had another plan. Chancellor Ba Shan offered to accompany him, but Qin Mu refused, reasoning that if Pangong So had truly intended to kill him openly, he would not have relied on shaman spells the previous night. Qin Mu therefore went alone. Jade Fragrance Floor was the largest restaurant in the capital and was designed like a collection of elegant gardens, with halls, courtyards, rock gardens, flowing water, fountains, and performances by beautiful women. It had once been extremely prosperous and required even high officials and nobles to make reservations. But its business declined after the natural disaster because the emperor personally led disaster relief and the capital's officials and nobles had to contribute. Once the disaster passed, its prosperity was expected to return. In Green Bamboo Garden, Pangong So welcomed Qin Mu and apologized for his retainers, saying that since they were already dead, their deaths should settle the grievance and asking Qin Mu to forgive them. Qin Mu entered the courtyard and admired its elaborate scenery, a moon-shaped entrance, thin bamboo along the path, flowing water cascading through a rock garden, and a stream flowing into a jade vase held by a statue of the South Sea Bodhisattva before eventually entering a pond. The pond contained scattered sandy islands resembling stars, while the Bodhisattva's inscription conveyed an immense and profound meaning. Small spells kept the water flowing continuously, and the carefully arranged scenery gave the impression of standing above the South Sea and overlooking everything below. Pangong So invited Qin Mu into a private room beside the pond, where 2 great shamans from Roland's Golden Palace stood guard. Pangong So ordered them to leave and have the dishes and wine served. Soon, maidens dressed in the styles of different tribes entered the courtyard and played horns, yangqin, damaru, and other instruments. Pangong So then directly addressed the attempted assassination from the previous night. He claimed that sending someone to kill Qin Mu had not been his idea and that he did not need to borrow another person's hands to kill anyone. According to him, The retainer had acted because he was enraged after seeing Qin Mu kill so many disciples of Roland's golden palace. So he entered Qin Mu's dream and cast spells against him. Qin Mu was surprised because he had expected Pangong So to avoid discussing the matter. He calmly said that he was fortunate to have survived and that the retainer was already dead. So he believed the little prince had nothing to do with it. Pangong So admitted that Qin Mu was mistaken. He had known the retainer intended to kill Qin Mu but had deliberately not stopped him. His purpose was to delay Qin Mu. He had anticipated that Qin Mu would make Chancellor Ba Shan remain in his room to guard against nighttime shaman spells. Meaning the retainer would fail to kill him but would still prevent him from cultivating. Qin Mu realized the significance of this plan as Pangong So explained that they had both broken through into the Six Directions realm at the same time. Pangong So had originally refused Qin Mu's challenge because he had recognized Qin Mu's extraordinary battle power and was only 80% confident of defeating him. However, one day had completely changed the situation. Qin Mu had been required to meet the crown prince that afternoon, leaving him no time to strengthen and explore the mysteries of his Six Directions realm. At night, he had been forced to guard against the retainer's shaman spells and again had no time to study his realm. Pangong So, meanwhile, had spent the entire day strengthening his Six Directions and raising his cultivation. In his view, one day was enough to turn Qin Mu's chances of victory into zero. Qin Mu examined Pangong So and realized that although the young prince still possessed a soft and immature appearance, his eyes contained a profound depth completely unlike that of an ordinary youth. Qin Mu praised him and mentioned that even Heaven Knife was afraid of him. Then asked whether he was 14 years old. Pangong So corrected him, saying he was 13 in his current life. People of the prairie endured the wind and sun, causing their bodies to appear older than they really were. However, if Qin Mu was asking about the age of his soul, Pangong So said he was already 11,000 years old. Qin Mu was astonished that Pangong So revealed this so easily. Pangong So explained that he had no reason to conceal it from Qin Mu and praised Qin Mu in return, recognizing him as Heaven Knife's disciple and admiring the cultivation he had achieved at such a young age. He stated that on the day they entered the Six Directions realm, he would have only been 80% confident of defeating Qin Mu. Pangong So then revealed that, counting his present life, he had already lived 19 lifetimes. Throughout his long existence, he had encountered countless heroes, witnessed countless deaths, lives, sorrows, and joys, and regarded himself as a reef standing through the passage of time while countless extraordinary talents passed like rushing waves. Even the exceptional emperors of various eras had been merely passing waves in his eyes. And Heaven Knife, despite once raising his knives against heaven, had likewise been only a traveler passing through. In his sixth lifetime, Pangong So had reached a point where he believed his path, techniques, and divine arts could no longer advance. He therefore entered the Central Plains and joined Dao sect to study Precelestial Supreme Mystery Technique in Dao Sword. The Dao master of that era placed great expectations on him, made him a Daozi, and even expected him to become the next Dao master and lead Dao sect. Qin Mu was shocked to learn that this ancient monster had once entered Dao sect and become its Daozi, meaning he had learned its ultimate arts, including Precelestial Supreme Mystery Technique and the 14 writings of Dao Sword. Pangong So explained that Dao Sword was extremely difficult to comprehend. During that sixth lifetime, he reached only the 13th sword and could never comprehend the 14th. Even possessing the power of Precelestial Supreme Mystery Technique was insufficient because completely understanding Dao Sword required terrifying attainments in algebra. He eventually died of old age without mastering the 14th sword. In his seventh lifetime, he entered Dao sect again and still failed to comprehend the 14th sword, only managing to cultivate half of that sword technique. In his eighth lifetime, he entered Great Thunderclap Monastery. Qin Mu asked whether Pangong So had gone there because Dao Sword could no longer help him break through and whether he intended to learn Rulai's Mahayana Sutra. Pangong So corrected him, explaining that he had gone there primarily to comprehend Buddhism. The Dharma of Great Thunderclap Monastery possessed extremely profound attainments in understanding one's nature, while Rulai's Mahayana Sutra gathered the Buddhist methods of cultivating one's nature. So he naturally wanted to study them. He began as a small monk, read through all the Buddhist scriptures of Great Thunderclap Monastery, comprehended them, and only afterward learned Rulai's Mahayana Sutra. The Rulai of that era regarded his comprehension as the best in the world and believed his Buddhist attainments had even surpassed his own. Praising him for his unhindered eloquence, Pangong So cultivated all 20 heavens of Rulai's Mahayana Sutra, but eventually left Great Thunderclap Monastery because its Buddhism still could not help him break through the final realm. In another lifetime, he reincarnated as a woman and entered Passion Parting Palace. In another lifetime, he went to Little Jade Capital, remaining there for several lifetimes before finally mastering all of its ultimate arts. He praised Little Jade Capital as a sacred ground even greater than the 3 major sacred grounds. Afterward, Pangong So went to the Heavenly Saint cult. Qin Mu asked whether he had studied the great educational Heavenly Devil scriptures and what he had comprehended from them. Pangong So said that although the great educational Heavenly Devil scriptures were powerful, they were slightly inferior to Rulai's Mahayana Sutra and Tao Sword. However, before he planned to leave, he learned that the unity technique of the great educational Heavenly Devil scriptures could only be passed from one cult master to another. Wanting to obtain it, he remained in the Heavenly Saint cult. Unfortunately, the Heavenly Devil cult master of that era was extremely powerful, and so was his disciple, who was praised as a saint appearing only once every 500 years. Pangong So lost to this disciple and therefore failed to become the cult master. Because of this defeat, Pangong So betrayed the Heavenly Devil cult, brought experts from Tao sect, and gathered righteous practitioners from the righteous path to attack the Heavenly Saint cult, eventually killing the once in 500 years saint. Pangong So explained that the saint had indeed been extraordinarily rare. He fought the Tao master to the death and, even after Pangong So launched a sneak attack, severely injured him. However, the saint was eventually exhausted and killed by the overwhelming number of righteous practitioners surrounding him. Before dying, he passed the position of cult master and the unity technique to the Heavenly King Qing of that era. Pangong So himself was also severely wounded, but believing that he was only one step away from conquering the Heavenly Saint cult, he continued leading the attack. Cult Master Qing then passed the unity technique to the saintess before leading the cult followers in a final battle against Pangong So. Unable to continue because of his injuries, Pangong So was forced to retreat to the prairie. Later, he heard that Cult Master Qing had died in Jade Ripple Pool, while the saintess had succeeded him as cult master. She slaughtered so many Tao sect and righteous path practitioners that they were left terrified, eventually exhausting her strength and dying after passing down the position. Pangong So asked Qin Mu how the Heavenly Saint cult referred to these 3 cult masters. Qin Mu answered that they were called the 3 kings. Pangong So agreed that the title was appropriate and told Qin Mu that he should now understand both his relationship with the Heavenly Saint cult and the source of his previous 80% confidence. However, after gaining an entire day to strengthen his 6 directions realm, Pangong So claimed that he was now completely confident in defeating Qin Mu and that Qin Mu did not even have a 10% chance of winning. Qin Mu stood up, stretched, and said that he suddenly felt like killing people. Pangong So also stood, and the two walked out of the private room side by side. Before leaving, Pangong So instructed the 2 great shamans to leave the dishes there and keep them warm because he would soon return.